Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Chats with Chaudhry. I hope you're safe and well. Today, I'm continuing my Reflections and Forecast 2022-2023 interview series, where I get to sit down with senior executives across the life science, pharma and biopharma value chain to get their views in the last 12 months and also their predictions for the coming year. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by the Society of Lab Automation and Screening, or SLAS for short, CEO Vicki Loise, and their new president, Jan Lichtenberg, who for his day job is actually CEO of Insphero, to learn more about their thoughts on the last 12 months and how they see 2023 going. So first of all, Vicki, Jan, it's lovely to see you both. How are you?
Great.
Thanks
Great to see you too, Rizvan.
And Vicki, I love the view outside your window. That's not a virtual screen, I know, and it's
No.
beautiful outside. Where are you calling in from today?
So yes, I am calling in from snowy Chicago. This is pretty much the typical background of Chicago in January, so I thought I'd share it with all of you.
And Van, I think, Jan, I think you've got a lovely snowy background, but you can't show it. But where are you calling in from today?
From Zurich, Switzerland. So we live in the winter as well. At the moment, you see my office.
And here in the UK, where I'm in Surrey, it's just a dreary, wet day. So it's not very scenic outside my window, unfortunately. Well, it's lovely to see you both. First question for you, though, Vicki, before we start talking about 2022, is for people not familiar with SLAS, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So SLAS is a community of 20,000 individuals from around the world working in and developing laboratory automation equipment, new technologies, and a wide variety of science. And then it is also those individuals who are using those technologies in the lab, primarily life sciences researchers, mostly in the drug discovery space.
Fantastic. Now, looking back at 2022, here's one question for both of you. So you can each take your turn. So maybe you, Jan, you might want to answer first and I'll ask Vicki after that.
Mm-hmm.
Describe 2022 in one word and why.
So from an SLAS perspective, that one word that comes to mind for me is restart. I think the big SLAS annual meeting last year in Boston was the first scientific exhibition and conference that many in our industry attended in person. I think it was a very bold move by the executive team of SLAS to do that, right? It was still kind of uncertain on how things would pan out, and I think it was a fantastic event, and I think it also was a really important impulse to the industry to make sure that we get together again and that we start interacting and re-entering the face-to-face scientific debate that makes us progress in what we do.
Right. And what about you, Vicki? What word would you use?
I would use energy. And, looking back to SLAS 2022 in Boston, I think everybody was a little anxious about what it would be like, how many people would come, how would we interact again face to face. And you could immediately just feel this energy as soon as the day started and the hall opened and the conference began. And that really carried throughout the entire year, whether it was those in-person events or online events, online meetups we held throughout the year, lots of conversations that we held with vendors and those who are using the products of those vendors. And you could just feel this buzz, this place where everybody was not just happy to be back face to face, but I think happy to take some of those learnings that we developed over the last couple of years during the pandemic and push them forward and apply them to new things.
I think that's a very good point, actually, that now that you mentioned that, because obviously the pandemic forced a lot of more remote working. And I think lab automation came to the fore, didn't it? Very much so during the pandemic, to show the importance of automation within the lab and being able to access information and allowing people to do the things remotely as well. So that's a very good point. Now, looking back at last year, though, from an SLAS perspective, what were some of the achievements? Obviously, you've talked about the conference as well, but what were some of the major achievements from an SLAS perspective in 2022? Vicki, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, the conference was wonderful, as was our Europe conference in Dublin. But, you know, we also held 4 symposia throughout the year, both in the US and Europe. And those events are always a deeper dive into a single subject. And we saw those communities come out for those events as well and really take the time to get deep into a particular subject area, meet up with their network in that particular sector. Those were all really, really exciting to see everybody come back to. You know, we also experimented with a variety of online conversations, I'll call them. I don't know if they'd be called full-blown events. But we have things called a technology idea exchange. And these are a variety of different subjects where those who are working on that technology provider side are talking about some of the science that they're seeing, maybe even some of the problems that they're seeing consistently amongst their clients, and sharing information about how those problems can be solved. Those have been very, very popular in 2022. And so we will, of course, be continuing those into 2023. What I really saw in 2022 was any time that there was an opportunity for members of our community to have a conversation about a challenge or a success, they were ready to come together and talk about it. They really wanted to be sharing that knowledge in whatever format, whether it was face-to-face or online.
Right. And Jan, from your perspective, you know, obviously you weren't president then, but I know you've been very active with the SLAS, and you also are obviously very active in the industry anyway with the business. So from your perspective, what do you think were some of the SLS's achievements, apart from what Vicky's already mentioned?
So what I enjoyed a lot, especially being located in Europe, is to see the activities that SLAS brings into Europe to expand our community in this part of the world, and not just the SLAS Europe convention, but also local meetings that we had in the UK, in Switzerland, in Poland. So I think it's these local meetups help bring industry stakeholders together, help us pull young professionals, early career professionals into this environment to interact with more experienced people, but also for them to learn about what's happening on the academic side. How do they push the envelope forward? So I think that's great to see, and I think the European industry is going to benefit immensely from being more and better integrated into the SLS ecosystem.
Right. And let me ask you about some of the challenges and developments, though, within the actual sector. So if we're looking at lab automation screening and the use of that within research, drug discovery, or even further up, you know, or down, I should say, in terms of biopharma and pharma. I mean, from your perspective, what have you seen in the last 12 months in terms of the challenges that the sector's faced, and what developments have stood out for you? And maybe Jan, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the challenges that I see is that we still very often operate in silos, and I look at this very much from, let's say, the startup and small biotech perspective, which is a true innovation driver in our industry. But we still, I think, sometimes stand on our soapbox, and then that's the story, right? So if you do AI, very often I hear, hey, we only need artificial intelligence. We don't need any wet biology because the machine's going to sort things out.
Right.
But I don't think that's true, right? You need to have relevant biological data to feed the algorithms and to generate important information. At the same time, if you're generating biological models like we do, it's not enough to just do that, but you also need to think on the assay, about the assay side. You need to think about the automations side. You need to consider, what do you do with this data? How do you help the end user to find patterns in this data and take decisions? So the interdisciplinarity of our industry, I think this is really where the success and where breakthroughs happen. And I also believe that's what SLAS is very much about. It brings together engineers, chemists, biologists, pharmacologists, and that's what makes the magic happen in our industry. And I think it's still something that we always need to do, bring down these barriers and make sure that people from different disciplines talk to each other and work together.
All right. And Vicki, I mean, have you got anything to add to what Jan said?
I would just reinforce what he has said, you know, and we even saw this play out. The perfect example is with AI and a symposia that we had been running for a few years that was focused solely on AI. And last year, when we expanded that focus more into data science and data management, we really saw the interest in that subject take off. So when we started overlapping related topics, that's when we are really seeing some interest in that particular space. And so to Jan's point, you know, the silo thing is still very much an issue. And I think we see successes when we can sort of break some of those down and look across just what the thing is that we're working on at that particular moment in time.
Right. And one other question, which you may have already answered actually to some degree, both of you, is were there any areas or are there any areas that you think the industry could improve upon based on what happened in 2022?
Yeah, so I think breaking down silos is definitely part of it, right? And in that context, the whole topic of data management, data analysis, data interpretation, I think is going to stay with us very intensively. I think there is still a lot of groups, a lot of companies are still very much in a transition phase from, let's say, more classical methods of storing and using the data that they generate to more advanced and efficient methods. And I think that's a big improvement that we need to do, because generating the data is one thing, making sense of the data is another. But that's what counts.
Sure. And Vicki, anything else to add?
You know, I think one of the things that everybody learned during the pandemic was so much more can be done with so much less. And it was a big part of why automation exploded during that time and still is. But what we are seeing is a lot of pressure on those researchers to continue with that, even now that they're back in the labs. So whether it is to make the most out of automation or make the most out of that data and think hard about how you tap into it into a way that's efficient, all of those pressures are being felt right now.
Right. Okay. Now let's look ahead to 2023. And let's look at big picture first before we sort of drill down to lab automation. So, Jan, maybe I'll start with you, and then Vicki, please feel free to add anything afterwards. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, what do you see as the big, you know, your predictions for life science, biopharma, and pharma? What do you see as some of the big trends that are likely to happen in 2023?
So first of all, I'm pretty positive about the development this year, and I need to kind of wind back to 2022 to set the stage here. A lot of things in that later phase of the pandemic, I think, have been very positive for the life science industry, right? I think the industry has proven to be a key player in solving the issues that kind of plagued our society during the pandemic. But if we look at the market development in terms of biotech valuations, publicly traded stock in our field in 2022, it was brutal. And I think to some extent there was let's say, correction of certain assumptions in the market was necessary. But I think that this was largely an overcompensation in many cases, and that created uncertainties for some of the companies affected. So I think it was a hard year for some companies, especially in the discovery field, especially in high-risk areas. And now in 2023, we'll see a phase of coming back online, maybe having shedded some fat, but being able to operate and to also have the confidence of investors coming back in. And that's great for our industry in lab automation, because with that change, there is more appetite to invest into new technologies, to bring new experts into the companies, and to start expanding and growing again in the right directions. For me, one of the big trends that I believe we'll see are platform companies will continue to be very attractive in the field. And with platforms, we typically also see omics technologies at the very forefront.
Sure.
And everything from transcriptomics to metabolomics, lipidomics, proteomics, we'll see being more and more readily used. We'll see that in that kind of combination with more complex in vitro models, we'll see these tools being applied more to generate more relevant data to help us to better understand which pathways are active, how drug interactions affect certain aspects of the biology. And so this then ties again into the data sets that are generated and the need to understand these data sets, to store these data sets, and to move forward with that. And so that is something that I expect to see at a lot of conferences, starting with SLAS in February, but we'll see this topic coming up at several conferences, I'm convinced.
Mhm.
And Vicki, from your point of view as CEO, was obviously you do have to look at the big picture when you start looking at the year ahead. So what are your thoughts on 2023 and what do you think some of the big trends will be across life science and biopharma, etc.?
I'm going to springboard right off of what Jan just said, and I'm going to say data. If that, everything data science related, whether it is generating, managing, interpreting, using as efficiently as possible, that is definitely the space that we're seeing really explode right now amongst our community. Those who have been working in this space of data management and trying to deliver those tools have been talking about this for a few years. I think we're definitely at a place now where across the board, individuals and companies are realizing they really need to get their arms around this and make the best use of these huge data sets that they have, and maybe even look at ways to do the science without having to generate such huge data sets. Are there ways to go about this in a more efficient manner?
Right. Okay. Now let's look specifically at lab automations, the lab automation screening area. I mean, obviously, if you look at historically, lab automation was used at certain sections of workflows, if you like, within that process. With the growth of ATMPs and various other things, do you think the use of lab automation will increase in other parts of the workflow, and how? And do you think there's other areas that could be developed and what trends they could be in that space? Jan, would you like to kick us off on that?
Mm-hmm. So we see this in our daily work, right? One of the I think the pressing problems that a lot of companies have is staff shortage. It's not easy to find staff, good staff. It's also, especially in biotech hotspots, it's not easy to retain staff because there's so much demand and there's so much interest in bringing people in. So I think while lab automation was very much focused on increasing throughput and reducing variability or improving uniformity of the data generation, C prime factors, and so on, I think we also see a more, let's say, entrepreneurial aspect to this, where we say, hey, we need to automate certain aspects because we simply don't have the people to do it, right? And so sample management is definitely going to be a topic. And and I see automation moving a little bit away from high throughput these days, because a lot of the new modalities that we are looking at do not necessarily require us to screen 100, 250 or 500,000 compounds or molecules, but we're rather looking at very small, smart libraries. But then we want to dive really deep into the information that we get out of this. So it's not just a very simple viability endpoint or something like that, but again, rather complex analytical tools. And so that requires changes in infrastructure. It requires a lot of integration between liquid handling, sample dosing, incubation, and then also processing towards generating assay results. And so I think that's a challenge that a lot of the lab automation groups in the industry, but also in academia, are going to face. How are we adjusting ourselves to these new requirements?
Right. And Vicki, from your perspective, what do you think the big trends are going to be in lab automation next year, or this year, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I still hearing amongst my community about how quickly this space is still growing. You know, this is not something that has slowed down post-pandemic. And, you know, right now we're hearing about a lot of contraction in other sectors like technology and finance and banking. We are not seeing that in this space. And I think that's going to be the case for some time. I think, like Jan just outlined, the way science is being conducted has evolved and is going to continue to evolve and use those new methodologies looking forward. So we need a lot of people to be doing that work, and I don't see this space contracting anytime soon.
Right. Well, this segues beautifully, actually, I think, to what can we expect from SLAS in 2023. So, Vicki, maybe you want to kick us off on that and say, what can we expect from SLAS this year?
Well, you can expect in some ways much of the same. We will still be holding our international conference, which is taking place in about a month in lovely San Diego, where I know I'll be very excited to go to after spending time in the space that you see behind me. And our Europe conference this year is in Brussels. That will again be at the end of May. And again, those symposia that I talked about. But what we're really excited about are some of these smaller niche kind of meetups that we're holding. And we are holding them again in Switzerland and Poland in the spring. But we're also holding something we've been holding off on for quite a while because of the pandemic, something called roadshows, where we are reaching into academic settings and trying to reach those students and early career scientists and make them aware of the network that they could tap into with SLAS and the resources they could tap into with SLAS. So the first one will be in Cambridge in April, April 20th, I believe is the date. And then look for more of these to come throughout the year. These were supposed to launch in 2020. And so we are absolutely delighted to finally get these off the ground.
Brilliant. And yeah, as the new incoming president, how do you see your presidency going this year?
So far, I can only be happy, right? For the annual conference in San Diego, I think things are shaping up wonderfully. We have a lot of support from exhibitors and sponsors, great registration numbers. So this is really showing that we are back on track in this industry, and that SLAS is considered to be kind of the place to go to see what's happening in the market, to meet suppliers, vendors, technology partners, fellow scientists. So this is exciting, and it's exciting to be there during this time. Something that I'm especially happy about is the activities around Innovation Avenue, which is a platform provided by SLAS at these meetings and conferences for young companies from a very embryonic stage, so basically either freshly founded or still a project, to already slightly more mature, beginning their commercial traction. And I think seeing these companies, seeing the ideas that they bring forward, also the power which they drove innovation during the pandemic and are now ready to present new solutions. I think that's fantastic, and it'll be exciting for attendees to see and find out what's going on in Innovation Avenue at SLAS.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing it in person, hopefully in a few weeks' time as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So now, finally, and yeah, we'll start with you. And we'll finish with Vicki, as she's the CEO, so we'll leave her the last word, I think. What last thoughts would you like to leave viewers for 2023, Jan? You first.
So I think one of the things that I also tell my team here, which is all about lab automation and science, I personally am really proud to be in this field of science and technology at this day and age. I think the last years have shown us how important this technology is, right? And it's not just about developing vaccines, it's also about the clinical testing that was necessary to understand how the pandemic develops and what kind of restrictions we have to endure in our daily lives to make sure that that the pandemic is under control. The speed with which resources were kind of commissioned to helping generating this data, and the flexibility that is already built into this technology to make it available for that purpose. I think that that was fantastic, right? I tried to imagine how this would have looked like 50 years ago, or probably even 20 years ago, right? We would be in a very different place. And so being part of this journey, contributing a tiny little bit to this, I think is something that can make us proud. And it's also something that, you know, we can show and attract students and pupils to move into these areas, because we need more scientists, more engineers to keep that innovation wheel spinning.
Well said. And Vicki, last word to you.
Well, again, I'm going to springboard off of something Jan said earlier, and that is that SLAS is the place to be if you are working in lab automation or its use in the lab. This is the place where you can dive into education, content, science, a network of 20,000 people around the world. And it doesn't matter if you're a student, a postdoc, or if you've been working in this space for 20 years, we have something for you, and we definitely have people that you want to be talking to and working with and collaborating with. So if you haven't had a chance to check out SLAS, please do so. Come to slas.org and see everything that we have to offer.
Fantastic, Vicki. Well, thank you very much. And one thing I should have said at the beginning of this interview, but I forgot, but I'm definitely going to say it now, is I wish you both, your loved ones, and everyone you work with a fantastic 2023. Belated Happy New Year. We've only got to speak properly now. And I wish you lots of success this year and with lots of health and happiness. And thank you very much for taking time out to talk to me today. Viewers, I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did, but I always do, because I'm just a layman and I always find these things really interesting. But there's lots of great stuff there about lab automation in the future. So if you'd like to know more, then obviously check out the link that Vicki's just mentioned. That will be above the video. You can also learn more about Jan's business. I'll put that link in there for you as well. And you can also find out obviously about the conference, which is coming up in only 4 weeks now, I think it is.
Yeah.
Almost. So in sunny San Diego. So you can find out more about that as well as all the many other events they've got running throughout the world, in Europe as well. So not just in San Diego, you can check those out as well. But if you've got any questions for them, then you can, or any comments, feel free to put them below the video, because I'm sure both Vicki and Jan will be only too happy to see any comments you've got and be happy to answer them as well. So all the stuff for me to say, Vicki, Jan, it's lovely to see you both. I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in a month's time in San Diego. And until then, I hope you have a happy build up to the event. And viewers, I thank you for your time for watching. And until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
And that's a wrap.